Okay, this is lesson number 4. I'm going to teach you how to use vlookup tables, cell and range naming, as well as how to make a graph. Okay, so first up, we're just going to name a group of cells because it's going to be useful later on. So we highlight the list of names, and we're going to call it employee names. You can tell I've done a few takes because I've already named it. So you can also just type it in there just like you would in any cell. Employee names. What's important is to always press enter at the end of this, because if you don't, it won't save the name. And now we've just named this group of cells. So instead of it saying something like R, for example, it would say B4 to B8. It instead says employee names. Okay, so that's kind of useful. So here's our scenario. Shifty Bob wants to compare his employees' productivity based on how many cars they sell and the amount of hours they work. So we can tell who's wasting his time because he's a shifty bloke. Okay, so we go back to we're going to make a summary sheet for him. So go on sheet 3, rename this to summary. And now we're going to get some drop-down lists going for the names, because for a VLOOKUP to work we need some kind of source. Okay, so we're going to highlight 5 cells because we know we've got 5 employees. You could make this longer if you we're planning on having more employees added to the list, but we're not going to for this tutorial, so don't worry. 2 to 6, go to data validation, pick list like we did last time, and now here we type in equals employee names. Okay, and that will reference what we just named before. Alternatively, you can go to the sheet and highlight it, and it'll automatically know it's meant to be employee names, which is pretty good. Press OK. And now we have drop-down lists for our employees. So I'm just going to chuck them in for us right now. Very good names, these ones. Not really. Alright, so now we're going to name our table. So let's just insert another column because we need to. Insert. And we're going to call this one employees. And over here we're going to have cars sold, hours worked. Alright. Now, we don't want to have to retype in the data because that's a waste of time. We're going to make a formula that does it for us. So this is what the VLOOKUP is for. All VLOOKUPs start the same way. You always go equals VLOOKUP, open bracket, and now this is where the fun begins. Oh yeah, fun. Lookup value, that means what it's going to use to base the data on. So Sam Jones is our lookup value because that's the cell on our left. That's usually how you do it. So based on whatever client we choose, the VLOOKUP will point to a different figure. So click on A3 because that's where we're looking up from. Press comma, and now we need our table array, where we're getting our information from, which is back on the weekly sales page. So go back there. Now we're going to highlight from here to hours worked because that's all we really care about for this comparison. And you'll notice it's referenced it up here. Weekly sales exclamation means we're referencing another sheet, and then A4 to F8. A4 to F8, no worries. Okay, comma. And now we need column index number. This means what data do you want to look up? And the columns are numbered from 1 onwards, from left to right. So we want to get cars sold, which is column D. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So our column index number would be number 4. So type in 4. And comma again. And now we can either write true or false. If you want a proximate match, you write true. If you want it to be an exact match, you write false. I always do false because most of the time I want an exact match. You can either write it in or double click it like I did then. And now you close your bracket and you press enter. And we have a reference for the number of cars sold. Okay, so that's 3, Sam Jones, and 3 there. So just say we'll test our theory, we'll change it to Sally Smithers, and it changes the number of cars sold for us. Okay, so that's working fine. Now I know what you're thinking. We only got one list of the cars sold, so we need to plus 2 of these VLOOKUPs together to get the total number of cars sold. So that's actually pretty easy. We go back to our summary sheet and we just add a plus. So we go plus vlookup again, and we do the same thing. A3, weekly sales with an exclamation mark, A4 to F8. Okay, now, but this time instead of doing column number 4, we're going to go to column number 5. Okay, so just get rid of that because it automatically put that in for us when we click back to the other sheet. Column number 5, and of course false again. We'll get there. And close that bracket, and it's added them up for us. There we go, with 2 vlookups. I know that looks pretty complicated, but it's not actually too hard to do. And it will save us time later. Okay, now it works. 3 plus 3 is 6, obviously. Go back to summary. Now for the shortcut, grab the bottom right hand corner, just like any other formula, drag it down, and we've got all our cars sold and their totals there. So we should probably change our little heading here to total cars sold, because it's a total. And now we got hours worked. We're going to do this the same way using a vlookup equals vlookup, open bracket, based on Sam Jones again. So A3, comma, table array being our list back here. Yep. And then our comma, and that would be number 6, column number 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. And we want an exact match, so false. Close the bracket, press enter, and we've got hours worked right there. Copy that formula down, and now we've got a bit of a summary here. So let's put a title and call it summary of employees, and we'll just merge that, make it a bit bigger to make it prettier. We'll just format this quickly with all borders, color that in, make it a light green, sure, that'll do. Alright, now, so we've done vlookups, we've done range and cell naming. Now we're going to do a graph. The graph's pretty easy. So we just go and highlight the cells that we want our graph to include. So all of them. Go to insert, and then you've got these charts. Okay, chart and graph are interchangeable. So we're going to compare the two. So you can do this with a few ways. You can do it with a column graph, like that. Not too bad, but there's probably a better graph that you could use for this. So we're going to delete that one. Insert column, let's go with that one there. Alright, cool. So now we are also comparing the hours based on their cars sold. And so you can see who the most productive one could be. It's probably Bruce Wayne because he spends the least amount of time there, but still seems to have the second highest number of cars sold. Although Biff Biffenson sells a lot, although he also spends the most time there, so that's might not be that good at it. Maybe he's just very persistent. Okay, so this kind of stuff would be useful for Shifty Bob, I reckon. Okay, so we'll stick with this graph, but at the moment this graph isn't very meaningful because it doesn't have any names on the axes and stuff like that. So to do that, just get a layout, and then you got axis titles, primary, horizontal, and we're going to go with axis, a title below the axis. And now you can rename this to employees. And once again, we're going to go to our axis, change the vertical one. I'm not a fan of rotator's not too bad actually. We'll go with rotated. And we got NO of hours and cars sold. So number of hours versus the number of cars sold. Okay, we can even put a title on top of this as well. If we were to go chart title, and we could say cars sold versus hours worked. And I'll chuck a couple in there because I like to. And there we go. Now we've got a graph that is actually kind of meaningful, and it will be able to be updated based on whatever figures we change back here. Okay, so we've got a VLOOKUP happening for this table, and we've got a graph. And let's not forget our named range right here as well. Okay, hopefully that's been beneficial, and that's the end of this lesson.